Can everyone hear me okay? See the slides okay? Great. Well, welcome again. So lovely to see you all. We are very excited for this special event that we have, and we're going to get right started so you can hear from all of our amazing panelists. Um, Before we start, we do just want to say we know this is a very challenging time on campuses and really around the world. And so we hope that this program can provide some welcome positivity and inspiration for you all. And again, thank you so much for being here, especially during a challenging time. My name is Crystal Barrett, though. I am the programs coordinator at the Center for Artistic Activism, and I'm joined by some of my colleagues. Brandon, would you like to say hi?
Sure, yeah. Hi, my name is Brandon Bauer. I'm an associate professor of art at St. Norbert College. And I am co-leading the Unstoppable Voters Faculty Fellowship with Crystal and with Rachel. And I'm also previously a Project Pericles Fellow. So I'm really happy to bring both of these projects together and share the important work that they're doing supporting and promoting civic engagement.
Great. So to get started with the Center for Artistic Activism, we are a nonprofit founded in 2009, and we help organizations, individuals, faculty and students, etc., bring more creativity and innovation to their vital social justice and civic engagement work. And we do that through trainings and resources, research, and fellowships like our faculty fellowship. And excuse me, we have an Unstoppable Voters program that is one of our main focuses, and this really brings more creativity and innovation to protecting the freedom to vote here in the United States. And that's in the very expansive way that means. And through Unstoppable Voters, we've been able to work on college campuses and universities across the nation, working with faculty and students on creative civic engagement, like you'll hear about today. And we have just a quick video about our Unstoppable Voters program that we'll share with you.
Helping to get voters motivated and to the polls is a team of unconventional people that describes themselves as artistic activists.
For some Arizonans, election season has turned into a circus.
The Compton Cowboys riding their way to a ballot drop box at the Compton Library. They're taking part in the National Unstoppable Voters Project.
Yeah, and as you can see from that short video, Unstoppable Voters has been working for the last few election cycles, really trying to bring, surprise, humor, hope, joy, all of these things to creative civic engagement. And we're continuing to do that this election cycle with the Unstoppable Voters Faculty Fellowship. And you can see we're working with a cohort of faculty nationwide, developing creative, nonpartisan, pro-voting campaigns on their campuses using the Center for Artistic Activism's creative campaign framework. And the fellows represent a variety of institutions, including research-intensive universities, HBCUs, state universities, private liberal arts institutions, and they come from fields of art, design, theater, political science, and political psychology. And the fellows are located all across the country, from Arizona, Louisiana, Maine, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. So we're really excited. They just have completed their spring kind of pilots, and they're going to be rolling into the fall in the general election with some more creative civic engagement and pro-voting work.
Great, thank you, Brandon. And our friends and partners at Project Pericles, if you'd like to share.
Thank you, Crystal. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here with fellow civic engagement advocates. I am Ariel, the Associate Director of Project Pericles. I'm on the call here today with our Executive Director, Jan Liss, and Program Associate Tyler Levine, if you want to give a wave. I'm here to provide a little bit of background as to why Project Pericles teamed up with C4AA on this program. Project Pericles is a national organization that promotes civic engagement in higher education through our consortium of 29 colleges and universities, pictured here. We help higher education fulfill its responsibility to prepare students to be effective civic leaders. So how do we do this? We work with presidents and provosts and faculty and staff, students, community partners. Our programs are embedded throughout the college experience, but primarily are in the curriculum. So today, this panel spotlights one program in particular. You can do the next slide, our Civic and Voter Engagement Fellowship. So all three speakers here today are faculty fellows in this program, or at least the ones from Pericleans are. Faculty in this program receive a $1,000 award to use our online civic engagement resources. So they've integrated deliberative dialogue, addressed voter suppression in very creative ways, which you'll hear about shortly. Later, my colleague Tyler will speak more about these civic engagement resources that the faculty have used, which are free for anyone, available on our website. He'll also share how you can apply for this $1,000 opportunity, so do stay tuned. But the impact of our resources and our programming and this fellowship is way more compelling coming from the faculty themselves, so I'll pause here and turn it back to Crystal.
Thank you. And Brandon, do you just want to share this before we jump right in?
Sure, I'll share this. So this is just a slide from Tufts University's CIRCLE project, which is the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. And in the last few election cycles have seen the highest youth voter turnout in 3 decades. So the youth vote and the student vote is projected to have considerable effect on the outcomes in the next election. And the opportunities that we're going to be talking about here and the projects that we're going to be talking about here through the Center for Artistic Activism and Project Pericles can provide resources to engage students, help them understand the power of their vote in this important election cycle. And you'll see it's going to have a big effect across the country.
Yeah, thank you. And so today we're talking about creative civic learning. So you're going to hear from faculty fellows about overcoming student apathy, building power with community organizations, and how to incorporate creative civic lessons in unexpected disciplines. And so to start, we're going to talk about overcoming student apathy. We're going to hear from David Eiperspach, Assistant Professor of Art and Art History and Painting and Printmaking at Ursinus College in Pennsylvania. And then we'll hear from Susan Smith, Associate Research Professor of Art and Graduate Coordinator of the Intermedia Programs at the University of Maine. And so David, take it away.
Hey, yeah, Crystal, thanks for that introduction. So I'm, I guess, a Project Pericles alum, you could say. I ran your deliberative dialogue modules back in 2021, and then I'm taking on the effort again this upcoming fall in courses and, as we march towards the next election. So I'm just going to kind of paint broad strokes here and talk about some general reflections on that previous activity and other kind of like practices I've learned to be helpful when we talk to students about civic engagement and how art can tie into that. In my experience, drawing is a great way to stimulate dialogue, whether it's in an art class, a drawing class, or a non-art class. Those images up in the top right corner there is sort of just brain dump creative activities after the last 2 election cycles. Like whenever there's a tense moment or something that students want to process, like walking into a room where there's paper and piles of Sharpies everywhere and sort of like taking things on in that way has been productive in my experience. It like gets the phones away. It like creates like something physical and tangible in the room with some immediacy. And I've also found that students, if they're uncomfortable talking about these issues or their experience with them, having like a prop or like a quick and easy creative product that they can kind of like point to and talk about has been really helpful. Sharing these things whenever possible. That other image is a dusty old vitrine in the basement of the library where I installed some student prints. But whenever I can like take, no matter what the setting is, to take student projects out to campus in some sort of public facing way, it kind of amps students up and raises the stakes. And then when discussing voting, I found it helpful. And again, looking ahead to this fall, finding like unifying traits is really important to sort of place these people who may be voting for the first time, like placing that in context and kind of like turning it into like sort of a team sport, so to speak, rather than just kind of an individual act, right? So kind of putting that all in context. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so here's the previous Project Pericles activity. Again, this was about combating hyperpartisanship was the module and the resources y'all were running and providing great resources for at that time. This did happen in like an intro drawing 1 class. I teach at a liberal arts college, so this is mostly kind of non-art majors getting elective credit, learning about how to communicate visually. So we ran this activity where they generated these political cartoons and responses to information they consumed about hyperpartisanship. And then to my point about always taking things public to sort of raise the stakes, these were sort of translated onto this wall that was in the student center that we had access to. Yeah, it's another slide. Again, just low tech. This was kind of an activity we ran over the course of a week from development to installing them. But again, I found when things go public in whatever way that you can, they kind of get students engaged and more committed to what they're producing. General teaching point, I'm sure many of you all know this, but especially with kind of post-COVID students that might be a little more bashful about communicating publicly or kind of turning their ideas into shareable statements, having some sort of structure to kind of warm them up to that is really important. So here's how, the end result was those murals. Here's how it started with some questionnaire, some sharing. And then the final 2 slides, the point about just amping students up to vote and describing the importance of that act to them. Identifying unifying traits, I think, is helpful. I've always seen art students perk up when I can like map the traits of like what you learn as an art student onto how that relates to strong civic engagement, things like, community-oriented people, courage, curiosity, agency, historical awareness, all the stuff you learn as a young artist are good traits for good citizens. And then of course, kind of lumping them together, you're all young, you're like an underrepresented voting bloc. So again, that's a unifying thing. And then the last slide here. Demystifying the process. I've gotten positive feedback from students on this. They're like, everybody's screaming at us to vote, but we don't even know how it works. So something as basic as demystifying how the Electoral College functions, kind of what it means to register with a party or independent, like all of those things, just kind of breaking that down. They may not be hearing things you expect them to know. So taking a minute to do that has been helpful. And then linking like their vote again in the larger context. So I'm in southeastern Pennsylvania with the infamous like Philly suburbs. I'm in a swing small town in a swing county in a swing state. So that's an empowering thing too. That is again a unifying trait for every vote that is being cast by students in a particular class, where I might see them geographically.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. If you all have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to get to those later as well. And next, for talking about overcoming student apathy, we're going to hear from Susan Smith.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm in Maine, and it's been an amazing eye-opening experience this semester, much more so than I actually thought it would be. I worked first in a community with Center for Artistic Activism during COVID and working on vaccine awareness campaigns and exhibition. And I can see the effects right now on our cohort of that journey from the pandemic through that into the current socio-political, economic, environmental uncertainty. And I can see the effects that that's had on the cohort. So 2024 feels like it has an equal sense of urgency. And so I'm really grateful. I'm already taking notes from the presentation right here. So I work with Master of Fine Arts graduates and interdisciplinary PhD students, and the classes as listed here this spring, history and theory, socially engaged art, and feminist theory, have both master's level and interdisciplinary PhD students in a really transdisciplinary program, both at the master's and PhD level. And so we, in each class, designed and implemented individual projects, yet they were in conversation with each other through the whole process as we developed the work. And so this image is one of 30, I guess about 30, that were used for both projection and stickers across campus. And this one from the social practice class, and we were looking at modes of cultural production and questioning art's role in terms of cultural producers of media, as well as those that come in to the program from fine arts. So we have students from fine arts, performance, spoken word, a lot of different disciplines as well. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I learned so much this semester. First off, I learned so much. I was really unprepared for the level of both apathy and feelings of helplessness in the students. As we began, I began showing the toolkit that's provided in the resources from C4AA to the students. I realized I needed to back up, and the students expressed hesitation, ambivalence, if not disdain, about the voting process, and even civic engagement in general. I wasn't prepared for that. So the work really began stepping back and figuring out a way to approach this differently and really listen. And so we listened to each other. Students got to know each other because a lot of them didn't. And what began with really informal conversations, and integration of food helped a lot. And so it really felt like diversity was one of the key components in everything that we did. Diversity of students' backgrounds, and started to shift their attitudes. Students from Brazil, China, Iran, Turkey, Mexico shared their voting experience around different types of governing, mandatory voting, just different things like that, pressures they might have felt at the polls, voter suppression. And so it began to really paint a picture in the United States of privilege that started to affect those students across the board, especially those who are eligible to vote and hadn't thought about registering. So I asked them to share their stories, and we devoted a lot of time to really starting to look at research across the board globally in voting and kind of back things up. So this image here is There Is No Us Without You. And that was from the history and theory class, combined with the social practice class, voter registration booth, and they implemented stickers, mobile street art, projection on outdoor buildings. This is moved 3 or 4 different times throughout the semester so far, and it'll be more broadly distributed in our local area over this summer. And so the other thing that was really important that I really started to see later was a multi-generational approach. So we incorporated stories from several organizations that found out, so media is really important with this in promoting, but several organizations found out what we were doing, and they publicized the fellowship that I had. And so we got interest from senior citizens who were working at polls, feeling pressure and a little bit of uncertainty about moving back and working in the polls. And so the students started meeting with a lot of different organizations. What ended up being a really key component of this was hearing the stories from younger and older folks, I guess, really sharing their stories and their concerns for the future. Next slide. So this is us just creating that last one, the voter registration piece. So the feminist practice class has a really diverse group of students, and they presented what I thought was a real challenge. But using the resources and the toolkit that artistic activism has really provided, it really started to really shift and transform the way that we went about this. And I also looked at artists Coco Fusco and Carolyn Woolard, two key artists that, reading their writings and looking at some of their activist work on a really diverse platform, really started to speak to the students in the feminist class. And so they developed these 3 questions up there on the left: the vision for the future, what's worth preserving, and what's worth sacrificing for. And so we created a dialogue cafe that was printmaking using silhouettes. This was an early photo. By now, it's covered that wall, and we have a video monitor that has all the projects on it. And so it was really this hard conversations that happened around food and coffee. We have a coffee bar in the vicinity there that really started to create a project where we incorporated printmaking, incorporated students from K through 12 that could express their visions for the future. And that project really started to grow. And the cafes, one of them is tomorrow. So they're carrying that through the summer because it was a way for people to really diverse students start to talk about just using these general 3 questions. So last slide, please. And so this last slide, I think that they felt that we did some exit surveys in the classes, and they really felt that the keys to what they did, what shifts happened through the deep listening, through incorporating people from the community, especially when we brought in the seniors that were working on voting and had worked through polls, worked through many different election cycles, as well as the diversity of our students. The feminist students in the feminist class, I think their strength was the fact that they came together by their individuality. It was really interesting that they didn't come together as one voice. It was this intersectional, each of them with their own concerns. And they did a suffrage march through our arts community in the Mid-Coast, Maine, through the Center for Maine Contemporary Art, Farnsworth Museum. And this is just a little bit, this final slide, of some of the images from that. It was a very eclectic mix of costuming and stickers. And you can't really see it too well, but planting the seeds of democracy. We planted seeds all through the esplanades of the streets in downtown Rockland. And our hero in intermedia is Fluxus artist Dick Higgins. So bottom left is massive postcard mailings. And we did with a letterpress. And so those have just been sent out recently. And so I guess that seeing that relationship for the students, it felt, and for me, between our role as an artist and how that really can, all the multiple platforms that we can use as a producer, I guess, of cultural material was really, really important. And we've got a bunch of things planned for fall, so I'm really excited to take some more notes from everybody else that I can appropriate. So thank you so much for this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Susan. And thank you again, David. We're going to move on to our next topic, which is building power with community. So we're going to hear from Kristen Hughes, professor of design at Carnegie Mellon University in Pennsylvania, and Dorcas McCoy, associate professor of international relations and comparative politics at Bethune-Cookman University in Florida. And so we're going to start with you, Kristen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. It's such an honor to just be in your presence. So I appreciate that. I wanted to jump back to August 2020, where I ran a 6-week project within a 14-week semester. It focused on advocacy and action, and the students are 3rd-year communication design students, where they're learning how to develop complex communication design systems. In this particular project, oops, sorry, Krista.
Sorry about that. Not sure what
Okay.
happened there. Let me restart that. There you go.
You can go to the next one. So students were challenged to design a compelling public service campaign to help educate, motivate, and empower their generation to register and vote. We partnered with the studentvote.org, a group that believes young people's full participation in the political process is essential to a representative, vibrant democracy. Oops, hold on, Krista. Sorry. In those 6 weeks, students spent 2 weeks doing research. So they went out, talked to their peers, gathered a lot of information, learned about student apathy. We have a lot of international students on campus that felt like they just couldn't participate and didn't feel that if they put any time into helping other students, it would be a waste of time. And a lot of students felt like their voice, their one voice, one vote would not matter in the process. From there, the students had 3 weeks to work on iteration, testing, and then eventual delivery. And we had this incredible partner who was able to disseminate the student work very quickly onto all their social media platforms. I'm going to play you 2 examples. One is going to show sort of the breadth of a project, and then one will just show you the depth and diversity of the types of student projects that came out of it. You can go to the next slide, Krista.
To move. I move like the raging sun rays passing overhead, like moonbeams tossing sea breeze between open palms as if to play. To move. Like the deer fending from the hunter's mark, marked by life's plague, but beautiful frail skin peeling, crackling as it falls in circles below me. To move. I move with the moments that inspire movements that last to the end, like those Fridays in June. To move. To move. To move.
Next slide. Once students had their sort of design system developed, they had a week to really think about social media and developed a series of campaigns and Instagram stories. Go to the next slide. And also had to sort of show that they could encourage students to participate. So how many students in a week could they get to register and sort of engage in their efforts? The next video example is just showing really the diversity of student voice and just the individuality that came out in each one. You can go to the next one. Sorry, Krista, those videos are tricky. So jump ahead to 2024. It was just such an honor to get the Unstoppable Voters Fellowship. And it really allowed me to reflect carefully on that 2020 campaign and project that I did with my students. And it got me questioning, and it was really because of the incredible resources that the center offers to get me to really think about ways that we could engage with community partners outside of the campus. And next slide. So I spent a couple months just really actively listening and recognizing these very diverse experiences, strengths, resources, perspectives of so many amazing organizations that are doing incredible things within our community and beyond. Go to the next one. What really was, I think, exciting for me to see was that these groups were really entrenched in their essential work. And I was sort of, for the first time, a fly on the wall, listening, trying to be helpful, but really couldn't find a way in. And that was a really key moment for me. Go to the next one, Krista. Was going back to that question, it was like faculty-led ideas to strengthen democracy. And I realized that a lot of these nonpartisan nonprofits are sitting on these really big canyons. And in a way, we're all on these big canyons. And how do you begin to connect them to make sure, next slide, that we're working in a way that is not transactional, but transformational, and really transformational for both groups. Important for the students. I want students to have a transformational and actually an amazing learning experience with community versus a community partnership that's just looking for a logo, a website, but really doesn't have any interest engaging in students to a place of co-creation. You can go to the next slide. So it's kind of brought me to this question, is there enough time to build a foundation that enables authentic relationships and learnings for both parties? And I'll talk a little bit more about that in our group chat. But that's all I have for today. Thanks. And I'm sorry for going over time.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And my apologies again, everyone, for my mouse and tech little mishaps. Not sure what's going on there, but thank you for bearing with me. And we're next going to hear from Dorcas.
Hello, so happy to be here today to talk about our research project at Bethune-Cookman University. We're going to jump right into it and go to the next slide. I do want to say that this research was sponsored in part by a mini grant from our QEP program as well as your program. So thank you so much for having me. I must begin by saying Bethune-Cookman University, we go back to the last slide, please, previous slide. Bethune-Cookman University is located in Daytona Beach. We are an HBCU founded by the late Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. Civic engagement is the heartbeat of our university. Dr. Bethune was one of only 3 Negroes present in 1945 with the founding of the League of Nations that eventually became known as the United Nations. Our university's motto is enter to learn, depart to serve. And so that's what we're focused on, preparing students for service, especially civic engagement. So the course that I reimagined was POL 431, Political Science Research. This is one of the last courses students take prior to graduating. One final course that they take after this one is the senior seminar, in which they actually conduct research and write their senior thesis. The QEP for Bethune-Cookman University is experiential learning. This course focuses on experiential learning. In this course, students learn the steps to scientific research methods. We engaged in a number of campus and community partnerships. We also utilized the deliberative dialogue and the voter rights expansion models from Project Pericles. We're going to go to the next slide. For anyone who is interested in partnering, I want to introduce our partner, which was Equal Ground. Equal Ground gave our students a civic engagement experience beyond the traditional classroom, including an entire day at the Capitol in which students were able to shadow members of Equal Ground as well as the legislator. They also taught them about phone banking, community organizing, canvassing, and much more. One of the biggest takeaways is that many of our students received field experiences and internships as a result of their participation. To those of you who are out there, next slide, please, and you're wondering if this is something that I want to partake of in my class, I want you to know that the major takeaways that I'm walking away with is that by incorporating creative civic engagement elements, it really does provide a more innovative and culturally relevant experience for students. It also gives them a more personal and more profound learning experience, and the possibilities of integrating the arts as it relates to an interdisciplinary approach, they are truly unlimited. Next slide, please. And so as one who has taught this course for several years, it amazed me. I was extremely delighted to see the overall level of interest in the students. We participated in 5 different conferences this semester in which students presented various portions of their research. And you can see some of the names of the conferences there. And we ended the semester with a political science research forum. And so I'm going to close my presentation today with a highlight of a young man. You see him at the bottom of the screen, the bottom left and the bottom right. Naturally, he is a shy person and would have done anything to stray away from public speaking or anything dealing with community activism. But this project brought him to life, turned him to someone who really wanted to advocate for civic engagement and make positive changes in his community. So much so, not only did he participate in the research, he also grafted his brother, who also participated by giving us a spoken word, a speech on voting behavior. And then it closes out with a presentation of our world-renowned band. One of the members of our student researchers, he is a section leader in the band for the drums, and so he used that platform as another organization to continue the discussion about voting. Let's watch the video and see how creative civic engagement can really transform education.
Hi, my name is Jamar Lambert, graduating senior, and I'm from Sunrise, Florida. And this is my presentation, my senior thesis presentation on enhancing voter equity in Volusia County through vote by mail enrollment and re-enrollment research and initiatives. Okay, this is a restatement of my hypothesis, and then it basically says the decision to re-enroll and enroll and vote by mail. Vote by mail program is influenced by motivations or barriers among registered voters in Volusia County. And then here's just a brief of what a quantitative and qualitative data is. Quantitative is research that is analyzed by numbers and statistics, and qualitative data is what is made by asking your insights of the attitudes, opinions, and perspective. And I have a little speech by my brother on voting.
As a citizen of the United States of America, which is a federal government, voters put you have two people that represent your ideas, your ideologies, your concepts, your way of living. I'm gonna just give you an example. In Miami, when in the 1960s, late 1950s, early 1960s, you had the Cubans. The Cubans came over. They established themselves a community, okay? And established themselves as a community, they had to have people in office to project, articulate their concepts and ideas and ideologies of their lifestyle in another country. And the only way that they can do that is by voting the people in office that proliferates and articulates and get down into the nitty-gritty about their concepts and ideas and push it, and they make a bill and they pass it.
Being an American means hoping for a better tomorrow.
Pride.
To have hope.
Being an American means kindness.
Inclusion. Being an American means looking out for the good in people.
Everyone has value.
Justice for all.
Being an American means helping your fellow man.
Opportunity.
Being an American means equality. Acceptance.
Feeling my potential.
Being an American means working for a common good.
To have compassion, respect for all kinds.
Honoring my ancestors, my people, and my country.
Great, thank you so much, Dorcas. And then next, we're gonna go to our last topic, which is working in unexpected disciplines. We're going to hear from Alexandra Prince, Assistant Professor of Religious Studies at Skidmore College in New York, and Margaret Berman, Associate Professor of Clinical Psychology at Augsburg University in Minnesota, and also Assistant Professor of Psychiatry at the Geisel School of Medicine in Dartmouth, New Hampshire. And so, Alexandra, we'll start with you.
First off, thank you for inviting me today, and I'll just share quickly that I feel very inspired by the presentations we've had so far, and I look forward to those that follow me. So this is the second year that I've been teaching a course that I initiated called Indigenous Religious Freedom, and I copied here just a very brief way of understanding what this course explores. So the course explores the ongoing cultural and legal contests over Indigenous sacred lands, mountains, waters, plant medicine, ceremonies, and graves in what is now the United States, with a focus on the 20th century. So this is a course in which we investigate diverse topics, but one of our major through lines is better understanding how Indigenous activism and alliance between Indigenous and non-Indigenous folks in the United States has been integral to the legislative advances, however piecemeal they may be. So this course also involves laying a foundation for the students to better understand some of the major legislative successes. This includes the 1978 American Indian Religious Freedom Act, or ARFA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which tried to correct some of the toothlessness of ARFA. And then we also do a pretty big deep dive into First Amendment protections as they relate to religious freedom, as you might expect from a course titled Religious Freedom. In that context, too, we look at the implementation of the 1990 Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA. And we cover diverse topics relating to peyote ceremonial protections with the Native American Church, the contest over the sacred mountain, Mauna Kea, which has several massive telescopes that have been erected, and future telescopes that risk further deteriorating and desecrating that sacred environment to the Indigenous Hawaiian people. We look at the history of the No DAPL, or Dakota Access Pipeline protests, which began in 2017, 2018, but are ongoing. We also look at the legacy of Native American boarding schools and try to marry that with an understanding of the present day political action around passing legislation to try to heal from that traumatic history. And then what really I think grounds this course too is that we have an ongoing partnership and relationship and friendship with Ganajoholege, which is a Mohawk community that's located about 40 minutes from our campus. So we can go to the next slide. So I want to say too that this course is at Skidmore College designated as what's called a bridge experience. And this is a general education requirement that all Skidmore student undergrads are expected to take or required to take. And this is a course that requires students to better understand how power and justice have shaped the experiences of people with a variety of identities in the United States, and how these people have responded to the reality of inequality in their lives. And it also tries to prompt students to better understand how they can take a role and an active civic engagement role in the studies that they're learning about and the people whose histories they're exploring. So I have here an example of one issue that is ongoing that we worked on in the past and that I built on in this course year with the Pericles Fellowship. So New York State, up until very recently, was one of only 4 states that didn't protect unmarked burial sites. This means that if you were a private landowner and you unearthed human remains that were deemed to be of Indigenous origin, or you unearthed ceremonial items or grave items that were connected to those human remains, that individual landowner would have possession of those human remains or associated burial or funerary items, and they would not need to go through any kind of state process in order to repatriate those items. So one of the issues that we worked on was trying to urge the governor to pass this legislation. And so when I construct the deliberative dialogue on issues such as this, and we can go to the next slide, what I do is, I put together a resource guide for all the different entry points that students might take on these issues. I don't present any one action item that they might pursue because I understand that there are diverse opinions. One of those action items is weighing in to their Congress members on the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, which is a bill that's before Congress right now, which is really essential legislation to trying to push forward the initiative to bring healing to Indigenous communities who are trying to reckon with the devastating impacts of Native American boarding schools. In part, what this legislation would do would push for greater powers for institutions who are trying to seek records from private institutions who otherwise are not releasing information on how many students, for instance, went to each individual school, what their tribal association or identity was, and how many students died, which is all critical information. And we can go to the next slide. And then another way that we pursue and try to deepen why we need to take part in civic engagement on all of the different diverse topics that we explore is by forging, again, this alliance and this friendship that we have with Ganajohalege. So again, Ganajohalege is Kanien'ke or Mohawk, member of the Six Nations Iroquois or Haudenosaunee people, and they have a community, like I said, that's very close to our campus. So not only do we go there for what I call a service and learning trip to help the community prepare for their season, which is mostly during the summer season, where they house Mohawk residents who are trying to revivify the language, which is in peril right now. But we also work, truly pulling our sleeves up work to prepare the grounds for their annual Strawberry Festival, which takes place in the end of June. And so what this does and why it's especially crucial, and I'll wrap up on this point, is that this course is primarily attuned to issues that relate to and directly impact Indigenous lives in our country here. But the majority of students in this class are non-Indigenous or not enrolled members of any tribes recognized or otherwise. So it's especially important for us to understand why civic engagement is so integral by forging these relationships and these friendships and hoping that further prompts students to become engaged politically. Thank you.
Great.
Great. Thank you so much, Alexandra. And we are going to wrap up with our last panelist, Margaret. You can take it away.
Hey, thank you for that, Crystal. So I'm a little bit different than some of the other folks here in that I'm working with doctoral students. So I'm working with beginning clinical psychologists, folks who are in training to become clinical psychologists, mostly to do clinical work. And you can go to the next slide, Crystal. And so I embedded some of the materials from the Center for Creative Activism into a course I taught this last semester on social justice advocacy for psychologists. You can see the course description there. This was an elective for our students. And in terms of building in these materials, we built in a number of the pieces about the creative process and how to build activist campaigns throughout the course. And then in the middle of the course, we sort of did a unit on art and creativity and activism and advocacy. The focus of the course in general was very hands-on, was learning by doing in terms of how do social psychologists show up as advocates and how do we fulfill that part of our ethical obligation as psychologists. And we also focused throughout the semester on an issue that I thought students could all get behind and advocate around, which is the really crushing student loan debt that CIVIs face. CIVIs come out of CIVI training programs like ours with an average of $225,000 debt, and it's double that for BIPOC students. So it's a really pressing issue. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And I was interested to be asked to talk about clinical psychology as kind of an unexpected discipline to implement creative activism, because I was really struck by how hungry our students are for creativity, for the kind of engagement of spirit that happens when you incorporate creativity into advocacy work and addressing problems at a systemic level. Psychologists are taught to treat individuals, but the urge to really help at a systemic level is really intense for our students, and they face the same apathy. And I think it's really more helplessness than apathy that I think some of the other panelists have talked about. And what I loved about the artistic activism lessons was that they offered strategies that students sort of described as feeling doable, and that really gave a sense of empowerment and also a sense of kind of joy or play in service to doing this work. So you can go to the next slide. And so this is sort of an example of this. So like I said, my focus in the course was on student loan debt, but this was a day when a student came into class very personally discouraged about problems her son was facing in his school system related to his mental health. And so instead of sort of forcing students into learning these strategies with student loan debt, we sort of switched gears in the moment and talked about how could you learn some aspects of creative activism and creating an activistic campaign with a goal like transforming mental health in the schools. So that was the sort of utopic mental health goal we went to. And I asked them, we were talking about strategies, and I asked them to think a little bit about two different kinds of strategies. They had identified that they wanted the cheapest or easiest or most collaborative strategy to pursue these various objectives they identified that would get them closer to better mental health in the schools. But I said, great, that's fabulous. Can you also come up with, if you were going to pursue these same objectives, but in the most creative, unexpected, or artistic way? And so we did both. And you can see kind of this graphic on the screen where they came up with some objectives related to maybe we could have a practicum site at schools here in Minneapolis. Maybe we could get schools to hire one mental health provider. Maybe we could collaborate between one school with our CIVIC program to improve outcomes for their kids. But if you take a look at the tactics that they came up with under each strategies, the tactics for cheapest, easiest were sort of obvious things that they could come up with. Consult with faculty here, consult with principals. The strategies under most creative and unexpected and artistic at the bottom part of the screen, draft students to storm a school board meeting, create chalk murals of contrasting pathways of children's mental well-being in terms of how to help, if we help children collaboratively. And I love this because it really helped them think creatively and out of the box about how they could pursue the same objectives. And that led them to kind of take bigger risks. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And throughout the semester, we really just practiced these strategies, tactics, pursuing objectives in a whole bunch of different meetings in a whole bunch of different ways, learning best practices, training with folks from the American Psychological Association, with experts in student loan debt, meeting with Ilhan Omar's office and staff from her office, meeting with Senator Tina Smith's office, meeting with our local representatives. So we did a lot of this kind of real boots on the ground advocacy work. And you can go to the next slide. And this is what students said about it and what they said their experiences were. And the things that really stood out for me about this was, first of all, how empowering this was for them and how there was a lot of learning that just happened by practicing this work, that they got the courage to ask legislators for things, to talk to them, that they learned how to sort of do legislative advocacy, search a bill, that kind of thing. Just knowing that they had a voice and could call and write their senators, it sort of fueled some passion, made them feel like this was doable. Like I said, go ahead and go to the next slide. But for me, one of the most powerful things that students said were sort of up at the top there, that this was a student said, I never really paid a whole lot of attention to bills and policies prior to this class. I never knew how easy it was to get in touch with legislators. I knew logically that elected officials were hired by their constituents, but I assumed that once they were in office, they would just do whatever they wanted, that elections were the only way we had a voice. And it was really powerful and transformative for me to realize that students are thinking of voting as the endpoint rather than the beginning of their advocacy. And this class really shifted that. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And because I'm a psychologist, I like to use measures and kind of take a look at how can we measure objectively what happened. So this was pre and post class scores on a measure for counseling psychologists on advocacy competencies. And you can see at the beginning of the course, the average for the class was a 66. Below a 70 means that the person has a questionable commitment to social justice advocacy. They're just not interested in this at all, which was fascinating to me because this was an elective. So students had the choice, and still they were pretty apathetic. At the end of the class, they were scoring at an 85 or 86, and that's in the has some of the pieces in place category to be effective social change agents. Got to get a score of 100 to be considered a strong social change agent, but to me, it was really compelling growth. And one more slide, I think. So the takeaways for me were, first of all, there is no such thing as an unexpected discipline, that students are artists and they're activists across disciplines, even in a discipline that's in the social sciences like mine. And that these materials and lessons, I was just really appreciative of how comprehensive they were, and that they can be used to kind of make big dreams and goals feel really doable and attainable, shake up the ways that we usually do activism or advocacy, shake up some of that siloed disciplinary thinking. The biggest surprise to me was realizing just how fundamentally that civic engagement means seeing voting as the beginning, not the end, that giving students some power back, that they have more voice than they think. They just need to take that because they're hungry for opportunities to really build those relationships, speak truth to power, and they felt really empowered when we had the chance to fulfill those opportunities. So I'll stop there. I can see we're actually almost at time. I'm sorry, Crystal, we went over. You let faculty talk, we talk.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you to all of our panelists again. I know we are just about at time, but it was really wonderful to hear from you all and to just like gain all of this incredible knowledge. We may not have time for questions. People are welcome to hang out after if you have the time, but what we'll do is get to some resources for you all so that you're leaving with a little bit more. And Tyler, I'll give this to you.
Yes, I know we're out of time, or low on time, so I'll try to keep this quick. But obviously, thank you to all the C4AA folks and everyone, all the speakers, and everyone for joining us today. This has been really, really interesting and inspiring, especially in the current times. But I just wanted to give a little overview. This graphic kind of has a bit of just an overview of some of our civic engagement resources. I've dropped a link in the chat so you can check all these out. This has our modules, our resource database, which is all materials developed and built upon by Pericles faculty and staff. They're growing and updating as our faculty and staff do a lot of work. So yeah, it's really great stuff, could be really useful. And if you go to the next slide, Crystal, one more past this one.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So, and then I just wanted to bring attention to our fellowship opportunity. So this is an opportunity available to staff and faculty at any campus across the nation working within the humanities. So it's a $1,000 grant to incorporate some of our Periclean material, deliberative dialogue or civic engagement, civic and voter engagement discussions into your courses. I also put a link as well, so you can check that out. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, want any more information, or just have any thoughts. Yeah, I know we're low on time, but thank you all, and thanks for having us, and thanks for making this possible. And also thanks to our funders, Eugene Lang Foundation and the Mellon Foundation, because they really make this possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. And from the C4AA side, we have a book and a toolkit that's full of different case studies and resources and exercises for you to do. The toolkit you can download for free online. There's a link in the chat. And some of the lessons from that our faculty fellows have found especially useful are: what is a creative campaign, stories of creative campaigns, and drafting objectives. So I'll put these in the chat too. This gives you like the pages they're on and a couple links for you there. And then some more resources we can offer are, we have a creative consulting happy hour every Friday. We have a ton of handouts and webinars, exercises, and more on our resources page. And if you're interested in incorporating creative civic engagement lessons into your classroom, definitely reach out to us, and we can schedule a time to chat and offer you some even more resources. And thank you all so much again. Here's some of our contact for C4AA and Project Pericles. Sorry we didn't get to a Q&A, but reach out if you have any questions that you wanted to pose to the panelists, and we can get you in touch with them. And thank you again to our panelists, and people are welcome to stay after to chat if you have time. Thank you.
Thank you.